This guitar build is all about making the type of guitar that I have aspired to be good enough to make for the past 8 years, since I started luthiery. So while I start making the neck, let's have a chat through the plan. This is a new type of construction method for me, and if you have watched any of my previous videos, you might know that I have a real appreciation for the level of craftsmanship and detail that goes into acoustic guitar builds. And that's something I really want to bring into my electric guitar builds. So this guitar is really where that starts. This will be a set neck, semi-hollow electric guitar. I have a single piece Sapele neck, a back and side set in Sapele with a Bubinga top. I'll use a Bois de Rose fretboard, and I'll also be doing double binding on the body and binding on the neck in flamed maple with some additional flamed maple accents. The main difference in the way that I'm going to construct this guitar is in the body. Rather than cutting the body shape from a solid piece of wood and then either chambering or hollowing it out to give me a semi-hollow guitar, I'm going to heat bend the wooden sides of the guitar to the shape of the body and then add a solid centre block. And I'm going to do it that way for a couple of reasons. The first of which is weight. By using bent wooden sides rather than a routed out solid body, it will give me a much slimmer profile even if I dual laminate the sides, which I'm intending to do, and a lighter overall body. It will also give me a larger chamber inside the body, which will hopefully make the guitar a little bit louder played unplugged than it would be otherwise. It also adds a different aesthetic to the side of the guitar because you're dealing with one straight flat piece of wood that you're bending to shape, which means it'll be a uniform look around the edge of the guitar and you won't have any end grain on the butt end or the neck end of the guitar. And the last piece being that I have done bent wooden binding on quite a few guitars now, and it's a really enjoyable thing to do. It is one of the things I enjoy the most on building guitars, and I love the idea of doing that on the sides of the guitar. A big part of guitar building for me is how much you enjoy the actual build process, and it feels to me like you're really crafting something when you're using heat bending to create something that's in your head. I'll talk a bit more about the body when we come on to that part, but for now, let's get the fretboard glued onto this neck and flushed up and have a quick chat about the wood choices. I mentioned these small grippy silicone blocks in all of my videos now because I designed these with my friend Todd as an improvement over traditional bench cookies. And we now make and sell these, so if they look like they'd be useful to you, we'd love it if you'd get a set. At the time of this video, they're currently only available in the US, but in the next few weeks they should be available in the UK and then Europe later on. But back to the wood choices. I want the overall look of this guitar to be really clean and elegant, and that's one of the reasons why I've chosen Sapele with Bubinga, because the colour of those two woods is so similar that You may not even notice that it's a different wood on the top to the back and sides, but having a Bubinga top with a uniform linear grain that's a bit more interesting than any Sapele that I currently have available should give this guitar a really elegant acoustic type style. And the fretboard that I've chosen I think perfectly contrasts with those deep rich red-brown colours from both the Sapele and the Bubinga. It also means that flamed maple binding should contrast really well with everything. This is the first point in the build where I can really see how those choices have come together, and I'm really happy with how that's all worked. It may look a bit pale and light at this point in the video, but Sapele is one of those woods that really transforms under a finish. So I know now how this is going to look when I get to that point. So while I move on to marking up the location for the side dots and installing the small 4mm mother of pearl dots and contrasting black side dots, let's have a chat through the spec for this guitar. This will be a 626mm or 24.6 inch scale length, which is what you'd typically think of as a Gretsch scale length. It will also have 22 medium height narrow frets, a 43mm wide nut, which is what I find really comfortable for my Telecaster and I put on all of my guitars. It will be about 21mm thick at the first fret to around 23mm thick at the 15th fret, which I'd say falls within a slim taper for a neck. And I'll use a perfect C-shaped profile the same way I do on all my guitars. Now that the fret markers are all installed and the fretboard has been polished all the way up to the point it's ready for finish, all that remains is for me to pop in some frets, and that's the point that I will leave the neck at until the body's made. And so begins my favourite part of this build, heat bending the dual laminated wooden sides. I've taken the time to make myself a set of positive and negative moulds for this body that I can pop the sides into once they're bent, so that they can both relax and cool under the correct shape and pressure. They're also useful for me to clamp the sides to while I'm gluing up the two layers to make sure that the final shape is exactly what I designed. I'm going to do the centre block in two pieces for this guitar. The first piece will be one solid central spine that will go from the tip to the butt of the body, and provide one solid block to make sure that this is a rigid structure. The second piece will fit just the same into the body of the guitar, but I'm going to cut it to accommodate both the hardware that I've got going into the guitar, the cavities for the pickups that are going to go in, and leave a few horizontal braces in order that both the spine on the back and on the top provide both some support to the top and the back of the guitar, but also give me a decent amount of glue surface area to make sure that everything is secured and rigid. With the sides now attached to the centre block, I can go ahead and pop in the kerfing and start prepping the top. And while I'm doing that, let's have a quick chat about the design for the guitar. This is a single cutaway design, and it's a refinement of a guitar I built a while back in walnut. And it's what a classic single cut shape should be, to me at least. And I think it really suits this type of build. That vintage modern type of style is something that really appeals to me, not just because I think it has really nice flow and balance and proportions, but it's also really timeless. And I love that. I wanted to come up with a clean and simple sound hole design for this guitar too, but I'm not really drawn to the traditional F-hole style sound holes. So I did a slightly more flowing design which I've split into two, and I thought it would be a nice touch to pop binding on the inside of the sound hole so that the whole flamed maple binding design idea carries through all of the guitar. I'm only attaching the top of this guitar at this point and not the back, because before I put the back on and close the box up, I need to drill a hole through the jack socket and just test fit it before I pop the back on. With that done, I can go ahead and repeat the same process for the back that I did for the top and get that glued on. I'll also cut the hole for the control cavity at this point too, because I'm using a thin back for this guitar, which means I need to just take an offcut piece and pop a plate on the inside of that control cavity so that I have enough material to route into the back of the guitar in order to recess a 2 or 3 mil cover plate that I'll do later. here's the part where I really need to make sure that the alignment of the neck and the placement of the neck is absolutely perfect, because I've pre-cut the centre block in the body to line up exactly where everything should be. So if I don't get this part correct, everything that follows will also be wrong. And with neck pocket cut, I can now move on to probably my second favourite part of the build, cutting the binding channels and installing the wooden binding. And because I'm giving this guitar an acoustic type of style, I have a couple of extra binding channels to cut than I would otherwise normally do. I have a straight channel up the back of the guitar for a back strap, and I'll need to hand cut and chisel out a second piece on the butt end of the guitar where the strap button is going to go. I'll cut the channel slightly too short and slightly too shallow. That means that once I've installed the binding, I have to shave it down to both the top and the side of the guitar, which is the most foolproof way of installing binding and making sure it's all flush when it's finished. To make sure that that transition from the neck to the body is as comfortable as possible, I'm also going to just quickly add an extra heel block to the neck and deepen the neck pocket so that I can carve a more gradual transition between the neck and the body. And with that done, I can go ahead and measure out where my cavities fall on that centre block underneath this guitar top. This is going to be a 2 humbucker guitar. The humbuckers that I'm going to use are bare knuckle boot camp old guard. These are my favourite humbuckers, and they are their vintage voiced lowest output set. With all the routing done, I can now move on to another wonderful part of the build process. Thicknessing, carving and final profiling of the neck. I'll taper it down to the correct thickness first, and then use the facet method to carve a series of 6 facets across the neck to get me to roughly the correct profile, and then sand it to a perfect C-shaped profile. This is my new dust mask that I was kindly sent by Basecamp. It's now my go-to dust mask. It works perfectly and it's really comfortable for wearing for a few hours at a time. I'll pop a link to these in the description if you would like to get one, but I can highly recommend them. This is now a really nice point to be at in the build process. The final step is just to get the neck glued in, to take off the tiny bit of excess that I've left on the heel to give me a seamless transition into the body, and then to drill the holes for the controls. And at £4.12 before hardware, I'm really happy that that's a pretty good number. So the finished guitar, including hardware, is still going to come in somewhere between £6 and £7. And finally, the reward for all of the work up until this point. Watching the wood darken, richen and transform into its finished state. And then all that remains is to install the hardware and to set up the guitar, and then we can take a listen and a look. I'll do a few sound samples through a clean amp, just running through each of the settings. So please forgive my playing. I am looking at a way to get better sound demos for my videos, but hopefully this is good enough to give you an idea of the sound of this guitar.